What's up, guys? Welcome back. Tailboard Misfits podcast streaming now on Firefighter Nation with my co-host today, Preston Lyons from the Relentless Rejects podcast. Man, we're super excited to be here. Very honored to be streaming on this platform. And we're going to get going today, man. We got a good conversation planned, and I'm pretty excited for what today looks like. Preston, what's up, dude?
Man, feeling really good, absolutely blessed, and like you said, honored just to have this opportunity to come on here and speak and represent Firefighter Nation and fire engineering and just the fire service as a whole.
I know that's right, man. I know we kind of briefly discussed it. So in case you hear some lightning or hear some thunder in the background, it is currently storming its butt off here in East Texas. So we're going to roll with the punches, though, man. We're going to roll with
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful out here in Colorado, 300 days of sunshine. So if anybody wants to come out, hit me up.
Everyone knows Texas is better, though. No, man. So I guess what we really wanted to do is Preston and I, we've been running our own podcast now for a little bit. Preston's been pretty big on social media and kind of has his own platform established. And he recently started up his own podcast. And I've been running Tailboard Misfits for quite some time. And we really wanted to join forces and through this platform and just kind of develop a Q&A style episode where viewers like yourself can submit questions to us who, are both firemen in normal departments. I would say Preston nor I work in huge metropolitan areas, but our departments are decent size and we get the mix of both limited manpower and enough manpower to do what we want. And so along with those, you get the culture and you get leadership, and those are some things Preston and I are pretty passionate about, as well as getting to see a fair share of tactics and stuff like that, and relying on mentors and the people that have done these things before us to really progress in what we're doing. And so through Firefighter Nation and Preston and I have talked, at great lengths of this. We're at least bringing one episode a month, and it's hopefully going to be just Q&A style, where Preston and I collect some questions from friends, from social media, to be able to answer and give a real life perspective on what firemen and really, I guess, even if we wanted to get into it, paramedics get into work at fire-based EMS.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, dude. I mean, you said you and I both have our own platforms, but at the end of the day, one individual is not interesting all the time. Everyone's going to hear your stories. Everyone's going to know your niche and your gimmick and all that. And eventually they're gonna be like, all right, I can stop listening to you now, and we definitely don't want that to be a thing. And that's why I think we're teaming up, and we're also going to do the Q&A, like you said, is that we definitely have our experiences and the things that we've encountered through our time in the fire service. But by allowing people to just throw in questions at us, it makes us dive deeper into not just our departments, but collaborating with what you and I have experienced, and then also being able to use our network and talk to our mentors and our friends to get good information to where we can pass it on to the fire service. Anybody that wants to know what these questions are and are looking for a good answer, we're going to try to deliver it to the best of our abilities. And like you said, we're not necessarily subject matter experts. We're just firefighters that truly care about, making an impact and making the fire service better for everybody.
Well said. And, TBM at the root of it, my whole mission behind it was just, and I know it's kind of a blanket statement, but it is to add value to the fire service, specifically through shared experiences and then knowledge, right? And I think the Q&A is going to represent that perfectly, because we're taking questions from people, whether they be problems or maybe they just want, another perspective on it, and answering it through our experiences. So
yeah, that's one thing that I found out the more I've gotten outside of my own department is my problems they're not unique. Everyone is dealing with very similar issues in their own organizations, and it's across the country.
Yeah, and what's funny is, even though, like you said it 100% correctly, when we go to different classes or conferences, we typically play a game. At these classes or conferences, we find a fireman that represents someone at our fire department, because we're all the same. We're all the same, and just like that, we all have the same problems. We all have the same issues. We all typically, succeed in really good ways, but we also fail in the same exact ways as well.
Yeah, and then also, just for housekeeping, this is episode number 1. If you find value in this and you want to share the topics that we discuss and you think that it resonates with something that you've encountered or a fellow firefighter could find some value on it, share this episode. Episode number 1, we want to get to episode number 2, but we need for the fan base to actually share that and spread the message.
Absolutely. Share away. I'm going to kick it off straight to you, Preston. Right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So our good friend, shout out Michael Ramirez, he has a question. He said, we seek culture and leadership in the fire service. Can you give 2 examples of each and what that looks like at the firehouse level? And what do you do that represents each of those?
All right. Examples. So culture for me is like that moment you walk into the firehouse, what type of energy are you feeling, right? Is everybody already sitting around the kitchen table, grabbing a cup of coffee, asking about how your off time was? We run a 4896. How, typical conversation is, how was your 4-day? What'd you do? How's your family doing? And I think that's indicative of your culture right out of the gate. Are people sitting down and having conversations with one another? Or when you walk into the firehouse, are people immediately just throwing their stuff in their room and starting to work on their own thing? You can definitely tell which culture you definitely want to be a part of. I think the fire service is extremely unique to any other organization in the world, and this is why it's so special to you and I. Is that there is a brotherhood. This is supposed to be a family oriented environment that we're in, because when we go to run the emergencies, when the 911 calls drop, we need to be able to lean on each other and rely on each other. But if you don't have a good culture in the firehouse, if you don't have good relationships and trust, and you've built friendships with one another, it's just another work environment that everyone else goes into, right? If you don't want to embrace a good culture and that brotherhood in the fire service, you might as well go work in a cubicle or work at Starbucks, because that's pretty much the same thing with a bad culture. Leadership to me goes up and down the chain. It doesn't matter if you're the most senior individual, highest ranked person, or you're day one probie, you are capable of leading at something, right? Let's take the probie, for example. The probie is just fresh out of academy. They've been grinding. They've been getting their ass kicked, wearing an SCBA pack and blacked out and doing all kinds of different stuff. They're probably in better shape than the majority of people in your crew. Yet we treat them like they're incapable of doing anything, right? It is dependent on us to mentor and teach those probies, but being able to allow that person to lead and teach us the things that they might have learned out of the academy, something that I didn't pick up 10 years ago when I went through an academy, I should be able to allow that person to lead. And that entire, it intertwines with mentorship as well. Same thing though, as the company officer. I think the company officer position is the most important position in the firehouse, because you do have a little bit of a say. You have authority to say, this is how things are going to be run in the firehouse. We're not going to just throw the mop at the probie and tell them to shut up. We're going to allow them to have a voice. We're going to, scale back their stories a little bit, because it's not going to be story times with the probie. But the company officer needs to make sure that there's good conversations happening around the firehouse, good training, everybody's working out, and then just having good conversations around the kitchen table. So with all that being said, for me, good culture in the firehouse that I've been a part of or actually tried to build is coming in on day one, saying hi to everybody, having an intentional conversation with somebody, looking at them in the eye, let them know like, hey, I actually care about what you have to say and how you're doing. And that starts with me. I have to be intentful with the conversations that I have. And then as far as leadership goes, even if I'm the most senior guy in there, when it comes to training or working out, I allow people to have a voice and say, hey, what do you guys want to train on today? Is anybody working on something? Teach me something. I may not know everything. I don't care. Like I said, if you're day one on here, teach me something. And that's where leadership and culture come together.
Yeah. And I love what you said there, because there's a lot of stuff to take away from it. And at the end of the day, we had this conversation not too long ago in our group message. It's like, I think first and foremost, that company officer sets the level for the day, right? Now it's up to each individual to come in with the right attitude, right? Like your attitude is 100% your choice, and you can make that decision when you walk through the doors of the firehouse. But at the end of the day, when you're establishing a culture, that company officer is the first person that's going to say, this is how it's done today, and this is how we're going to do it from here on out. And then I mean, it is it's part of the culture, but that's the whole thing with leadership, right? Is he is setting the tone, he's leading by example. He's the one that's making sure that things are getting squared away, that the rookie's not getting, kicked on and pushed on, and really just there to be the housewife. But he's also involved with the training and stuff like that. One of my favorite things that company officers do for um, for firefighters in particular, but anybody, is empower them to lead the training for the day. And we had that conversation as well. It's just like, man, like you don't know what kind of confidence that builds, and really like the trust that you build with the company officer or as the company officer. Whenever you say, "Hey, I know you've been here, 3 months, but you're leading this training today," right? Like that builds an enormous amount of confidence between those two people.
Yeah, and a good way to build culture behind the scenes, right, is calling that probie the night before and say, "Hey, man, I got your back on this, but I want you to lead a training. Tell me about what you're passionate about. Tell me about what you're either working on or what you're good at or what you suck at, and then bring it to the kitchen table tomorrow when I ask about what you want to train on, and then I won't tell the rookie this, or I won't tell the new guy this, but as soon as we get off the phone, I'm texting or calling every other single person of the crew and I say, "Hey, the new guy's leading training tomorrow. I want you guys to embrace it. And if they mess anything up, keep it to yourself until after the training and then we can have a tailboard conversation about things that we could have done better or, the pros and cons of that training and we're going to develop that person because I I emphasize this so much with our new people. We're so it's so easy to beat up on them, right? They're the new guy. Of course, we're gonna razz them, we're gonna bust some balls, and that's part of the fire service. And that's they got to be able to fit in with that as well because dark humor is something that we actually implement in the fire service for our own mental health, whether that's good or bad. I mean, it's gonna be there, and so they got to be able to conform to that a little bit. But if you mentor that rookie on day one, can you imagine what they're going to be in the next 5 years? When you put your arms over them, you take them under your wing and you train them on day one, you build up that confidence and establish leadership in them. Man, the sky's the limit for that individual. Imagine if we did that with every single person in the fire service.
Right. And like you said, getting everyone else on board, because it just goes back to the old saying, like, you learn one, you do one, you teach one, right? Like he's already learned the skill or the subject and he's probably done it, right? And now you're going to teach it. And that's really how you master stuff. So I'm 100% on board with that. I think that was a phenomenal answer for that question.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Are you ready for yours? So we maybe should have
Let-
touched on it at the beginning here.
Let's do
All right,
it.
brother.
Let's
So
do it.
Tailboard Misfits, right? It's something that you kind of inherited from your boy Gunner, and a lot of people were asking him exactly what a tailboard is because when he was interviewing military people, we know what a tailboard is, but I want you to kind of first define tailboard, and then also the question for you is TBM only for backseat firemen? Why should other ranks or positions listen into what we are saying? And go.
Yeah. So in the literal sense, right? The tailboard is whoever's riding backwards that day. But that doesn't mean that everyone in that rig does not have the ability to be a tailboard for the day. Our boy Josh Everett says it best, in my opinion. Like he might be riding that front right seat, but he's a tailboard just facing forward, right? He's going to go bury up. He's going to fight fire, that stuff. And when it comes to like is this just for tailboard firemen? Like, no. Like, imagine the insight that a company officer is going to get from listening to how a couple like tailboard firemen actually think of things and feel things, right? The generational gap, generational leadership, all that stuff. Like, we think of things differently. We process things differently. We want to know the why behind things a lot more. And so, not to mention that in the fire service, we're learning all the time. You're never going to stop learning. And so through Q&As, like we might, someone that might be a company officer, someone that might be a driver, someone that might be a battalion chief, if they listen to this, I'm sorry. But they might gain some insight on some like real life, like issues that are going on with real firemen. These aren't fabricated questions. These are responses that we've gotten from people that work at career and volunteer fire departments that people are facing. So no, this isn't just for tailboard firemen. This is for everybody. Listen to it, share it. I mean, I'm hoping that this reaches everyone, but I want to make sure that the people that are engaged in this podcast really get the answers that they're looking for.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Is that it's not just for that backseat fireman, but if you, I've heard a couple times on the scrap. Scott Thompson talks about this a lot. He says, I'm a fireman first. It doesn't matter what rank I'm in. I'm a fireman. That's actually where all of us got our start. Right, is riding that back seat. And if you get too far up the chain of command and you're not connected with those backseat firemen, you're not relatable. Your people, your backseat firemen, the black hats, they don't want to come to you, because when we come to you about our issues, things that we've talked about over the kitchen table, and you're just, you know, regurgitating SOP and policy back to me, like, okay, that you're not relevant. You're not in tune with what our gripes and complaints are. There's no other better way to say it, but they're real issues for us, and this is where the TBM addresses those issues, and then hopefully those people up the chain of command are actually listening to them, and they're like, all right, they got these. These are the concerns in the fire service, and we got to address it, because the higher up the chain you go, you have all the authority, but you have none of the knowledge, right? The guys on the back seat, the guys that are out on the streets, we're running the calls, we see the buildings, we're pulling the hose lines, we're throwing the ladders. We have more perspective on what's actually going on in the fire service, but we have none of the authority. We have none of the say. So closing that gap, using Tailboard Misfits to be able to close that gap and deliver the same message, man, I think it's valuable.
Yeah, and then not to mention like the tactical side of things, right? Like the fire service has changed so much, and we continuously grow, and we find, through the development of like scientific things that we're figuring out through UL and stuff like that, like we're going to continue to grow. And as a company officer, you have to recognize that these things are being taught, right? Like they're being more introduced into the fire service. And so if you're not staying up to date with that, now you have a new tailboard fireman come in and they're doing some things that you've never heard of before in your entire life, right? Like what kind of turmoil is that going to create? So stay on top of things, right? And that's just another goal here, is just to really spread that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to butcher the quote or the story, but it kind of goes like, you got a major surgery coming up. You have one surgeon come in the room and say, hey, I got my medical certification, a physician's license 25 years ago, and I got an A. But they have not studied any of the new trends in technology and research as far as the medical field goes, but they got an A 25 years ago, versus the guy 25 years ago, the surgeon that got a C, got his physician's license, but he's been going to conferences, he's been enhancing his skill set, and he's been in the books learning the new trends, and he knows how to operate the new technology that's coming out. Like which surgeon do you want performing a major surgery on you? I want the guy that got a C, but he just recently, posted an article about, new tech.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
I mean, when I want to, when I think of myself becoming a company officer in the very far future, is that's who I want to be. Like I want to still be as engaged then as I am now, learning just as much then as I am now, and really like making sure that I'm staying in contact with mentors that help me and everything like that, still going to conferences and classes. And the hope would be to like eventually bring people along with me, right? Build the culture of getting outside, going to trainings and learning more than what's just taught locally.
Yeah, I got to give a shout out. I don't know if he'll ever hear this, but Chief Eddie Robinson from Cherokee Fire. I met him for the second time out in Pensacola, and he's the fire chief of Cherokee, and he always brings out a handful of guys from the department. And when I meet those firefighters, for a fact that they would take a bullet for their fire chief. He's a fireman's firefighter, he's a fireman's chief, and he cares so much about his people, and he's coming out to these conferences, right? He's not just the policy driven chief that's passing things down from his glass ivory tower in between golf tees. You know what I mean? Like he's in it, he's there. And I think that's what we want to see up and down the chain. And we're not trying to knock company officers or chiefs or anything like that, but I'm just speaking on like that was a cool thing to see. Chief Eddie Robinson is doing the right thing out there in Cherokee.
Yeah. What do you think he took, like the steps that he took to get that buy-in from his entire department, right? Like, he's obviously there going to classes, and he's been able to go back to his department and explain the why and how the value has been added to him in his career. You know what I mean? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
Like, he's done a lot to be able to get those guys to regularly come to those conferences. And I think those people exist all across the fire service. Surely they exist in my life. I know they probably exist in yours, but those people are like always like out in front, and they have such a good way of explaining like why they go to these classes and why they're gaining the knowledge and stuff like that.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. We'll touch more on that. I think that's going to be a big thing that we're going to have to keep letting people know, like, this is what TBM is all about, man.
Yeah, we'll revisit it every single time. I want to move on because I'm curious on this
All
one.
right.
What do you think is your most passionate craft in the fire service, and why? I want you to answer it first, then I'll go.
All right. For me, my most passionate craft, the thing that I care a lot about is as victim and firefighter drags and removal from the IDLH. My biggest fear is going in to search a structure and doing an extremely poor job, right? And I hope that it's changing, but I think a lot of us went through the fire service in academy, everybody knows about it, like holding the boot of the guy in front of you and then rubbing the wall up and down as you're doing, or like a right-handed search. And it's good to look for a window or a vent or something like that, but we're neglecting the rest of the floor where a victim's more likely at. And I think firefighter rescue survey, on top of what the instructors are doing at all these conferences and mini conferences, is starting to change that. I think fire academies are starting to pick that up. But me personally, I never ever want to go in and do a search and do it poorly and miss a victim, and then 2 hours later during overhaul we find a charred up victim in the bathtub or something like that. And more importantly, to build off that, let's say we do find a victim in the house, and now I'm struggling to get the victim out because I don't have the proper drags and techniques, and I'm trying to do this freaking halo harness at 3 a.m. in smoked out environment. And I'm fumbling it around instead of, practicing my skill set and being able to do whatever skill you want to do, whether it's webbing, whether it's dirty drags, doesn't matter. Just have it mastered. So that way, when someone is standing in the front yard saying my wife or my kid or whatever is in there, I can go get them. And I'm practicing that on a regular basis. To add into that, firefighter removal from an IDLH, right? It doesn't matter what it is. It could be heart attack, you bled through your air bottle or your air cylinder, or you're disoriented, or wire entanglement. It doesn't matter how you're still in the structure. I have to be trained to get you out. And when I went through academy, it was always RIC crew activation, right? And then how long does it take for you to find that firefighter down in the structure, find their pass device, and then we go through this whole rigmarole of checking the mask and checking the line and checking the bottle and putting the RIC device on them. And where it should just be, get them the hell out of the IDLH, find an area of refuge, get them out a window, take them back out a front door. It doesn't matter, but have a game plan, practice it, understand the DRDs, the SCBA pack straps, whatever you use, you got to master that stuff. Because for a firefighter that you cannot get out of a structure, I probably know that person's family, and I have to face that person's family if I fail them in the IDLH, and I never want to do that. So for me, I'm always working on stretch or search and drags and carries.
Dude, I love it because I'm pretty passionate about that as well. It's probably, as far as passion goes, it's probably number 2 on my list. And I'm the thing that I'm most passionate about in the fire service, like hands down, is nozzlemanship. And I'll tell you why. Because there's people like yourself, right? They love the search, and I love search too. I love, victims, victim drags, victim removal, all that stuff. But like that, it's sexy, so everyone focuses on that, right? Like that's you're the hero in that scenario. But what people don't talk about is how they are allowed to continue to search, continue to safely remove the victim, right? And it's because there's some dude that hopefully knows what they're doing on the nozzle, putting water where it's supposed to go. There's a big argument that we're not going to get into. I'm not saying anything about which one comes first. Like, I think we all know. But in my arena, like everything happens simultaneously, so the argument is obsolete for me. But without an effective nozzleman, like you're not going to be able to create and maintain survivable space. You're not going to provide the coverage that search crew needs when they do and if they do find a victim. And so for me, it's learning everything I can about water, about nozzles, about hoses, about flowing and moving and when to flow and move and smoke, right? Like going to all these classes for that. I think without a doubt, that's what I'm most passionate about, and being able to flow and move, from the Camella and transition into the hip grip, right? Because they both have their advantages and disadvantages. Knowing where to go if you locate, a victim on the hose line. Knowing, appreciating a well-staffed hose line to be able to make the seat of the fire, quicker with better placement of water. And all these things, right? Like that's what I'm most passionate about, because at the end of the day, like rescue is the objective. We've heard that 100 times. And yes, search is very, very, very important. And it needs to be done, because if you don't search, you're not going to find. But you have to have someone on the nozzle that knows what they're doing.
So I'm going to stir the pot, brother. You ready?
No.
So the thing that I've been preaching with guys, and I'll pull up different images of house fires with heavy fire involvement and one searchable window. And obviously you got to prioritize whether to getting a line or a search. And let's just even call it a bread and butter structure fire with maybe one or two room and contents fires, but the structure has some smoke involvement. Once again, I was taught to drag the hose line in, find the glow and put the fire out, and then ventilate and get out of the structure. Maybe do a little half-ass search off the hose line or something like that. But now what I've been trying to preach to people is that, look, the hose line is there for you to be able to get a good knock on the fire and control that fire to allow other firefighters to be able to conduct a search of that structure. Even if the structure is 70% involved, sure, if I have the manpower, go ahead and pull a hose line so you can check that fire. Allow my guys to get into that one window right there. Everything else is on fire. Allow my guys to get into that one window and search it. And then, yeah, we'll go into fire control and extinguishment. But I truly believe in that life safety over fire extinguishment and property incident stabilization. It's a hard message to understand, because I do believe in what you're saying is like, yeah, the Andy Furtick's like, get a hose line at the seat of the fire and everything gets better. But we've both been in structure fires where even if you put that fire out, you're still in an IDLH, you're still in a smoke filled environment. And firefighter rescue survey is showing that, if you can get to a victim within 4 minutes of arrival, their ability to, be recovered and save a life is higher. And so I've been trying to teach guys to be aggressive at finding that seat of the fire and get there. But your job isn't necessarily to just extinguish the fire. It's to check that fire to allow people to get in there and search that structure. So we're just stirring the pot a little bit. I don't know how you feel about it, but that's my just 2 cents.
I'm going to answer it easily, just because I know that people aren't as fortunate, but where I work, like, we're so on top of each other, dude. Like, we can accomplish both at the same time. Like 9 times out of 10, the hose line and the search crew are going through the door at the same time. Or, the search crew's bailing in through a window as the hose line's going through the front door. We can accomplish that. We respond with 3 engines, 2 trucks, and a medic, along with 2 battalion chiefs. And so in most cases, I guess, the medic is typically assigned with the first due line, but in a situation like that, they're going to break off and search, right? It's just the way it is. And that's the easy cop out here. I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. My whole point in saying that is and because of the reason why I'm passionate about that, is if I'm in your scenario that you're saying, and I have people bailing in through a window, you want me on the hose line, not someone that doesn't know what they're doing, right? The nozzleman's position is to facilitate the search, right? And
Yes.
So if he doesn't know what he's doing with correct placement of water and correct hose movement, like, your guys are going to get jammed up. So people need to be just as passionate about flowing water as they do bailing in through windows. And that's where I think I think there's several people passionate about flowing water. I'm just saying that VES and search and window-based searches and victim drags, like, that's the sexy stuff. right? We all want to do that, but we need to be just as passionate about flowing water.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man. The first time I got to train with Kyle Romagus, and he taught me flowing and moving, and obviously when to flow and move. You don't just do it all the time, but
Mhm.
mastering certain grip, whether it's hip grips, Camella, they call it lock off in certain areas, but mastering that ability to do so, it's a beautiful art. I get what you're saying, and especially if we're not dealing with any life safety in search or anything like that, and you are on the nozzle, right? That's your baby, that's your job. You better be good at it. And the first time I got to train with Kyle Romagus, it's just like it blew my mind because I was just extremely average at getting a hose line to the door and terrified of actually flowing and rounding corners and stuff like that. And then I trained with Kyle, and I've been working on that craft ever since, and it's gotten better and better. And I'll even tell you a story, dude. We just last shift had some hose management training at our training center. And it initially started off with the crawl, walk, run, right? Like, hey, look, just coat and pants, sit here and flow. And now we're going to flow, half bail, move, flow. And then now we're going to flow, whichever position that you want to do, hip grip, clamp slide, any of that. And I was definitely out there coaching these guys on how to do different. Because with the Camella, you can do. There's people that duck walk, right? There's people that
Mhm.
just do one knee slide forward. There's people that drop a knee. There's a true art form for it, and like what you're saying, whatever you like, whatever is comfortable for you, master that shit. Because yeah, the nozzleman is a awesome position to be in.
Yeah, and I think just to hit on that, like the first class I was able to take with Kyle, it was in Denver at Mile High, and before then, I thought I knew how to do the Camella, and then showed up there and probably embarrassed myself. Right, like learning it from someone that teaches it so well makes the world of differences. I mean, I went to nozzle forward, and we teach the hip grip in my department, and I thought I knew how to do that, but learning it from Aaron Fields himself, like just a few tweaks in the posture or whatever
Mhm.
you want to call it, like dude, made the world of differences. So like you're gonna get those little tidbits there, here and there, but yeah, I mean, like I'm not disagreeing. Like I love the search aspect of it. Like I think we need to have super aggressive search tactics. I'm just saying, like if we're going to be so all in on search, like we need to be just as passionate about water, just as passionate about it, especially whenever like in my scenario, right, like we're piling in on top of each other. I mean, we're gonna have two engines and a truck and an ambulance there pretty quickly, regardless of where you are in my city. So,
What are your thoughts on establishing a water supply? Where in the line does that happen for you guys?
yeah, that's late in the
Okay,
game
cool.
for us, man. Yeah, unless the plug's sitting right in front of the house, which happens, like um, it's late in the game. We're gonna booster back up
Yeah, you're
the majority of the time.
cool. Yeah, your engineer can always hand jack a hydrant or something like that. But yeah, pushing it down to at least like third arriving or something like that. I do tell
Yeah,
my crew though, man. I'm like, look, if we're riding down the road to a structure fire and you see a massive black column of smoke, I was like, we may bump up that a water supply up the line a little
sure.
bit if we're dealing with heavy smoke. But obviously, you can't necessarily make that judgment call until you're on scene and you need to get a proper 360 and a good size up of the structure. But then once again, like we're gonna try to
Yeah,
consider life safety at the same time.
yeah. I think most residential structure fires, until you start really getting into like the McMansions, like huge houses, like you can forego that water supply at least for the first two engines. Which I think this kind of leads into probably our next question, right? Like, what do you think that the true truck and true engine combination like works in the suburban setting?
So yeah, this is the thing that Colony Fire is known for, right? Chief Scott Thompson. There's a few, maybe like a couple suburban fire departments in the state of Colorado that does a true engine and truck combination out of the firehouse. My department isn't one of those. I think what you hinted on initially was having a 3 to 4 man engine crew with a medic unit attached, which gives you two extra bodies that you can take to a structure fire, and that those medics or whoever's on the box could actually jump in on the hose line to give you hose management and searching capabilities. Right? That's what we do. For the truck engine combo, I think about Anthony Roette out there in Mobile Fire, and that's kind of how he operates. And I'm truly jealous of what they're able to do because if you have that trunk and engine combination, you're able to train together in the same firehouse. You're able to talk about philosophies, and you kind of understand your roles on an incident before you're even toned out to one, right? So the engine, uh, I mean, there's so many tasks for us in the suburban fire setting, right? Especially like you said in those McMansons, uh, getting secondary means of egress, pulling the hose line, establishing a water supply, getting a search done, ventilation, vertical or horizontal, whichever that looks like. It's a lot of task saturation that we have to accomplish, specifically on engines. We have in my department we have one truck or a Quint that primarily operates as an engine. We're trying to embrace a truck culture, but it's not there yet. It's changing, but the idea of an engine and truck combination of the engine crew arriving, getting that hose line stretched, uh, being able to potentially establish a water supply easier and quicker, and then that truck company being able to acknowledge what they need to get done first, whether that's forcing the door, getting in there ahead of the hose line and doing a search, going above the fire floor, coordinating with the engine and saying, hey, this is where we're going. And this is where I like where Anthony Rowett talks, is that being on the engine and you're on the nozzle and you're controlling that fire, when you lock eyes with that truck company officer and they say, we're going above the fire floor, which is a very hazardous, dangerous situation, you know that you guys can trust each other. The engine crew should understand we are not backing out of our situation until we know the truck is either off the floor above or we've got the fire under control. I think in the suburban setting, especially the way with building construction goes, these, like you said, these McMansions, architecture isn't necessarily the same as it used to be. The old construction's gone, the legacy, all that, it's kind of gone. Things are burning faster and hotter, and the layout of these homes, especially in parts of my jurisdiction, you can get lost and disoriented because you got 14-foot ceilings, giant open floors where a wall used to be. They've knocked it out. Now there's like a freaking, a gym or play area. It's just something that if you had an engine crew that's specifically assigned for fire extinguishment and a truck company that's specifically assigned for tactical ventilation and search, I think the suburban setting truly would benefit off that, even though they're looking at Colony like they're the Cowboys, and Chief Scott Thompson embraces that wholeheartedly. But I wish that wasn't the case. I wish more suburban fire departments would embrace it as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing with that is the true trucks and the true engines, like, it's specifically from them, right? Like, I appreciate that. And what we would call that in my department is static assignments, which is what we used to run, right? So the truck guys are truck guys, the engine guys are engine guys. And I think it gives a much better opportunity to learn what your position is. Like, and I won't say the word, but I told you when you and I did our podcast, like, we have to learn both the engine and the truck, right? So naturally, there's going to be some gaps. Like, unless you really press in, like, it's going to be super hard, especially as a new guy, to know everything there is to know about engine work and then know everything there is to know about truck work to really be the best that you could possibly be. And so the way they do it, right, is those truck guys are truck guys and their engine guys are engine guys. Now, aside from one of their guys wanting to, like, step over to the truck, like, for the most part, they stay pretty true to that. I think he says it like, if one of their truck guys goes down, they're not going to put an engine guy on the truck that doesn't know what he's doing. Like, the Dallas Cowboys don't put an offensive lineman for their backup quarterback for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. And when they show up on scenes, like, everything works so well. And, it's not 100%, but I would say close to 90% in my department, right? We're not a very big department. We do respond with that true model, right? The engine's doing engine work and the trucks are doing truck work. I would say that the only difference is the way that our trucks are spaced throughout the city. That the first due truck's probably going to get ventilation. We go to the roof a lot, and probably the second due engine's probably going to get search, right? And so the second due truck is typically going to be RIT or something along those lines, depending on the fire. And so the model works, right? Like, if it didn't, people wouldn't do it. And so I don't think it's overkill for suburban settings. I think it would work, very well for most departments if they really embraced it. I think the most fantastic thing that they do, right, is the true personnel as well, right? Like I said, their truck guys are truck guys, their engine guys are engine guys. Like, imagine how much better their engine firefighters are than someone that rides, has to rotate daily, right? So now they're trying to go back and forth between truck and
Mm-hmm.
engine, truck and engine, truck and engine. Not saying that it's a bad thing, but I think that those guys are probably a lot more proficient because they eat, sleep, and breathe like engine work or truck work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to build off that, bro, like you're saying, like the truck guys are truck guys. They know what their expectations are, what's being asked of them on a fire scene, and same thing with the engine guys. So they know what to train on, they know what to build on. So that way, like I said, when the tones drop, everybody goes to work. There's no questions. There's less communication happening on the fire ground because everybody knows what their job is. Now, let me talk about the opposite of the truck and engine combination. Our fire department specifically, in the majority of the suburban fire departments, you generally have a 3-man engine with a 2-man medic crew. Let's talk about roles and responsibilities, not even fire related. EMS, it's a large part of our job. What is expected of you in EMS? For my department, we have to know 3 different protocols: hospital, Denver metro area, and our own department's protocols that we've established with our medical director. That's a lot already when you're talking about the algorithm that we have to follow with every single medical emergency, whether that's cardiac, stroke, trauma, environmental. It does, there's so many things that we need to be on top of. Dosage administrations and IVs and cardiac monitors, and everybody has to establish a role. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier. EMS, especially in the protocols, they do a very good job at breaking everything down in a step-by-step way. And then it also tells you what your proper dose is, how you're going to administer it. And I don't want to get too deep into the medic thing because the firefighters on here, especially the truckies, don't give a shit about what I'm saying right now. But imagine all the EMS as a whole, and now you're operating on an engine doing truck work and engine work with everything. So EMS, truck work, engine work, all in one firehouse with 5 guys. We can do it, but it's pretty tough. You're asking a lot for guys that probably only have a high school diploma. Let's be honest. If we were smarter, we'd be working for fucking SpaceX or something like that. So, we're simple, type A, aggressive guys that want to get after it, and this is a lot of stuff. And I will say it's a little bit of a sensitive topic, man, is in Colorado out here, we actually have 2 fire medics that one of them's actually, I think, going to prison for an EMS call. And you guys can figure out what call that is. I don't need to elaborate on it, but this stuff is real. This is stuff you have to be on top of your game. And so that is why I am a big fan of the truck engine combo, because it maybe takes a little bit of that stress to know everything all encompassing fire service and being able to execute proficiently.
I mean, that's just another thing that the colony does well is they have the paramedic only guys working on the ambulance, right? So that's a whole different subject. But yeah, no, I agree, right? Like if you have to know all 3, you have to know all 3.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the situation that we're in my area, and we make it work and we do it well. And I think as firemen and type A personalities that we're going to do what we have to do with the hand that we're dealt. But I think that we could do it better. I think that's the main.
That's the whole point of the question, right?
Yeah. Yep. So our man Matt Valdez, bro, out here in San Antonio, he wanted us to talk about it. He said, explore the idea of being part of a larger cause and connecting with people for growth, right? I think it really in the fire service, we sometimes forget that we're not confined to the 4 walls of our firehouse. I know everyone's heard that phrase a bunch, and we can expand outside of it, right, to something bigger. And not saying that we forget about the boys back home, but we can build relationship with people. We can be a part of something bigger than just our fire department. I think, man, I don't want to misquote him, but I think it's Rob Ramirez, and I love what he says. He says, I don't work for a fire department. I work for the fire service. Yes. And I think that's the essence of this question here, is the fact that we work for the fire service and not the fire department. So what does it mean to be a part of something bigger and getting that for growth?
Well, let me ask you something real quick, dude. You said not too long ago, the Mile High Fire Conference was your first conference. Did that, just being there and networking with firefighters out there, did that open up some doors for you in your mind? Did you like have that like, oh my gosh moment of the fire service is much bigger than I thought?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really what a lot of, so I have to speak on this. Like, I work for a really squared away fire department, in my opinion, right? There might be people that have other opinions, but we do a lot of things really right, especially when it comes to tactics and the way we fight fire and stuff like that. And when I went there, there was a lot of like, holy crap, like we're doing a lot of the right things here. And we could get into that conversation, but it's just like that was only laid because people have attended classes way before I ever got there and brought that back to my firehouse or fire department. But yeah, I mean, I met so many guys, right? Like talking with different people and realizing, like we already hit on, that everyone else was struggling the same way that we're struggling or having the same issues that we're having, and there's a lot of people going through the same steps that we're walking through at the same time, and then just building, like that's how pretty much you and I connected, right? Through the Mile High Conference. It was, I knew you were there. I don't think we met when we were there, but it was like, hey, I was just there, right? And so it really did open my mind up to be like, all right, I got to go to these other classes and other conferences, because it was my first conference. And although, I host a podcast, I'm a little bit like shy, if you will. So I didn't like go out and like talk with a lot of people. But what I did get to do was staying at that host hotel. Like I had to talk with a lot of instructors. I mean, I talked with several guys from Brothers in Battle for hours at the evening time. And I think that's when I realized, like, man, all these guys that are teaching and they're big in my eyes, they're firemen, and like they can relate to me. And so I think that was one of the biggest takeaways for me.
I got one more question for you, and then I'll dive in.
Okay.
When someone walks up to you, let's say you're going to the grocery store, and a citizen walks up to you and they say, "Thank you for your service." How does that make you feel?
Oh, weird, dude. Like I always respond very respectfully, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, our pleasure. Like, thank you for letting us serve you, more or less. But it's an awkward feeling, right? Because at the end of the day, like I would do this for free, right? And pretty much what these people are thanking me for, aside from going to fires and responding to medical calls, is hanging out with the boys at the fire station. You know what I mean? So it's an awkward feeling. It's an awkward feeling.
Yeah. So, dude, for me, I served 10 years in the Navy before I got into the fire service, right? I tell everybody it was a natural progression for me to join the fire service. I didn't have this like super crazy why I joined. I didn't join the fire service because, the 9/11 and the brotherhood and all this stuff. I joined because in the Navy, everyone is taught firefighting skills. So I thought it was just a natural thing for me to go from a military organization to a paramilitary organization. But just to elaborate, after my 10 years, I did what was asked of me, right? I followed my orders and didn't go above and beyond. I was not a student I worked on the flight deck of aircraft carriers. I served in Japan on the USS Kitty Hawk and in San Diego on the USS Ronald Reagan. And I like to tell everybody, if you watch the first 5 minutes of Top Gun, those guys in the yellow shirts with the wands and all that stuff, that was me. It was fun. But once again, I didn't go out of my way to become a true student of the craft. And I was more of a hot dog, like hot shot, fancy, flashy guy on the flight deck. And I was very proud of my skill set. But when I left, like my time was done. That was it. I had no impact. The people that I talked to that are in the Navy, my name is never brought up, ever. They're like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that guy. He was okay. And now he's gone. So who cares? And the reason why now I am so passionate in the fire service to try and make some kind of impact and to network and to learn from these instructors and to even be a mentor from Joe Schmo, who's just now submitting his application into a department, and tell them like why I think this is the best place to be. This is the best organization. This is the best job on the planet, is because I squandered my 10 years in the Navy. When someone comes up to me, especially when I was in the military, and they were like, thank you for your service, I'm like, I didn't do anything to earn that statement. And now if someone comes up to me as a firefighter at the grocery store and they say, thank you for your service, I don't want to feel that way again. I want to be able to say, you know what? This is what I do. This is what I signed up for. I'm here to serve you. I do everything. I wake up and I brush my teeth thinking about the fire service and how I can help people in my community, because that's what fills my heart. That's what gives me purpose. I squandered that in the Navy, and I'm not going to do that shit in the fire service again. So to elaborate with what Matt Valdez is saying, who I absolutely love, and I got a chance to meet him face to face, one of the greatest people that I've met in the fire service who's making an impact, getting outside the walls and to network and like you said, being shy and not thinking that you are worthy of calling yourself a firefighter or to talk with these giants of the fire service, like throw that out the window. It doesn't matter where you are in your fire service career, whether you're 25 years in or you just got out of academy, you are a part of something bigger, and you need to understand that. You, like you said, your department, that is just a vehicle for you to serve. It is a vehicle for you to be a firefighter. If you are not taking the time to perfect this craft, when it's all said and done, you are going to feel like you wasted your time, like you squandered your time and your opportunity. So don't waste it.
Dude, the entire time you said that, something popped in my head. Real quick, we're coming up on the end of Memorial Day weekend, right? That was this past weekend, and super thankful for all the military personnel that really paid the ultimate sacrifice for us to be here and be goofy on a podcast, for everybody else. But John Sparrow's post yesterday, one of the lines in it said, "Be an American worth dying for," right? And that really struck me because, and I think he even elaborated, like he's going to do everything in his power to be an American worth dying for every single day, right? And I think that larger picture, that larger cause is really wanting to fulfill what we're here to do. And that's really to serve, right? Not just the public, but those around us and the men and women that we work with. But more specifically is at the end of your career. I love the way you said, at the end of my career specifically, like I don't want to look back and see time wasted or opportunities missed, right? I want to be prepared when the time comes, right? And I want to look back and know that I made an impact on the fire service, right? Not my fire department, but the fire service. And that bigger cause, I think we would be doing a disservice not to mention our boys in the group message, because it's such a very great representation. Preston and I have a group message, and it's myself, two other guys from Texas, Michael Ramirez, Josh Everett. I don't know where Dylan's from. He's somewhere on the East Coast. He sounds like he's from East Texas, but he's not. He's like is he in one of the Carolinas?
Potentially, I think so. I don't know.
Somewhere over there. We got Greg, who's up in somewhere up north,
like near Michigan,
Minnesota, Michigan, something. He's a Yankee. Joe, Pennsylvania, right? Who else am I missing? Oh, Cody. Yeah. Cody down in Florida, right?
Cody on the box.
And we're in this group message, and we feed off of each other daily, right? Like it's truly a blessing to be a part of something like that. And without being, a little extroverted and putting ourselves into positions in classes and going to conferences and being involved in different things, like we would never have that opportunity really to serve each other. And realistically, whether Preston wants to admit it or I want to admit it or anybody else in that group message wants to admit it, like serve guys across the country in the fire service, right? Like that's such a small thing. It doesn't have to be this grand, huge thing, but these small little things matter. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and building up that tribe, like you're saying, like we have our tribe. We're able to talk about other things outside of the fire service, right? We've been talking about kids and spouses and things I don't even talk with people in my own department about. I have my group of people. We have our group that we can actually bring all of our problems. I mean, shout out to Ram. He just had a baby girl less than a week ago, and we're FaceTiming, smoking cigars in celebration of him being having a new baby. He's already a father, but now he's got another mouth to feed. But dude, I mean, where else do you get that other than, the fire service?
Yep. The fire service.
Absolutely.
Emphasis on the fire service.
Fire service.
Preston, bro, we're coming up on an hour. I think we've hit just about every question we wanted to ask. Closing it out here. Guys, like Preston said at the very beginning, if you found value in this episode, which I really hope you did, please just do us a favor and share the message. Send it to your crew, send it to your chief. I don't care. Just share the message if you found value in this. We're going to be back with more questions. We're going to be back with some guests. So, Preston, brother, anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we're going to try to turn this into a Q&A on a monthly basis. So if you have questions for us, if you want it to be answered on the podcast, hit me up at the Relentless Rejects on Instagram and John Velez at
Yeah, Tailboard Misfits.
All right. Yeah. Send your questions in. I mean, otherwise I'm going to make one up and say that someone sent it to me. So I don't want to do that.
Yeah, dude. And by the way, Preston's absolutely killing the game right now. Check out his podcast. He's got a lot of great guests on there so far, and I know you got some more lined up. But make sure you check him out, Relentless Rejects podcast. Y'all are streaming everywhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. Till next time, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.